chronic stress directly depletes magnesium, B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin E, D, zinc, and calcium, but it can deplete a host of other micronutrients indirectly through the gut issues that it creates, and even some of the downstream physiological consequences that we talked about in today's episode.
What's up and welcome to Sam Miller Science, where you're joining me just over a decade into my personal journey of working to bridge the gap between metabolism, macros, muscle, and medicine, all while helping coaches scale the impact that they desire and deserve. If you are here, thank you so much for listening and for trusting me to help you elevate your coaching game or to lead you in your transformation to realize your true potential. In either case, each week I'll be sharing my methods, models, and message to serve as leverage for your specific goals. Without further ado, let's get on to today's show.
Could stress be robbing you of your micronutrients? People work so hard to dial in their nutrition and optimize their overall health, but stress and its impact on micronutrition is one of the biggest issues in modern health that doesn't get talked about enough. In the past on the podcast, I've covered chronic stress effects on male and female reproductive hormones, how stress can contribute to things like insulin resistance, and much more. But today we're focused specifically on stress and cortisol and its impact on micronutrition, particularly how chronic stress in your life and chronically elevated cortisol can deplete these key vitamins and minerals, both directly and indirectly. So as we think about the layout of today's show, first we'll go into a brief reminder on the HPA axis physiology and the difference between acute and chronic stress, since there's a substantial difference there. So we'll cover the micronutrients that stress directly depletes, and then I'll lay that out and then go through the mechanisms by which this happens for each one of these nutrients. And we'll talk about some of the ways that stress can indirectly deplete a person of other micronutrients, even if they're eating an otherwise pretty healthy diet. So stress is going to directly deplete magnesium, all B vitamins. So when you see something like a B complex supplement, it's depleting multiple B vitamins, vitamin C, E, D, zinc, and calcium. So magnesium creates a vicious cycle when it's depleted by stress. Basically, stress increases magnesium loss, causing a deficiency, and in turn, that magnesium deficiency can enhance the body's susceptibility to future stress. See, magnesium modulates how much ACTH is released in response to CRH from the hypothalamus. So if we have adequate magnesium levels, we should have a lower cortisol response to stress. Most of the time, 99% of magnesium is within tissues and not in the blood, which is why it can be tough to assess levels with a test. RBC magnesium is probably going to be our closest thing from a serum lab perspective, but in the presence of stress, magnesium makes a shift from intracellular to extracellular and is released into the blood, which causes more to be excreted by the kidneys. If you continue this long enough, it can result in depletion. In terms of the B vitamins, many of these are direct cofactors in either the synthesis of certain hormones, like stress hormones themselves, or in the enzymes that help to clear them. So for example, vitamin B5 and B6 are cofactors in the creation of CRH, ACTH, cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So nearly every single part of the stress response. Then vitamins like B1, B2, B5, B6, niacin, and vitamin D all have direct roles in the production, metabolism, and excretion of cortisol, which now you'll see why B complex recommended in so many different adrenal support interventions or protocols. Stress also particularly depletes niacin, which is a precursor to NAD. You've seen a lot of hype around NAD supplements or NAD peptides, but if we're depleting niacin, we're missing basic fuel that keeps our mitochondria healthy and turns on endogenous antioxidant pathways. So we can see a lot of potential downstream health consequences from this. Now, vitamin C and vitamin E are also depleted because they're our main vitamin-related antioxidants or dietary antioxidants. When we have chronic stress, cortisol loses its anti-inflammatory capabilities, causing higher levels of basal low-grade inflammation. And whenever we have inflammation, oxidative stress generally follows that cascade. And your dietary antioxidants, specifically vitamin C and E, are going to attempt to neutralize that oxidative stress and can be used up in that process. Then we also have zinc. Zinc is a key mineral, plays a role in so many different functions in the body. It's hard to pinpoint just one mechanism of how stress can deplete it. Studies that have looked at the topic have shown that stress depletes zinc concentrations. This goes for cross-sectional studies where they enlist people that self-identify as stressed and look at their levels when compared to a non-stressed population. And it's also been demonstrated in animal studies whenever they induce psychological stress. Now, it would be kind of unethical to just cause undue stress for humans, so it's one of the reasons reasons they use animal studies there. It's also been shown in human RCTs with intensive exercise. After intensive exercise protocols, zinc levels tend to be depleted if there's not adequate dietary or supplemental intake. As far as calcium goes, this one can go under the radar because it's not generally going to show on your normal serum labs, and we don't really have any acute symptoms related to stress and the calcium depletion. Calcium serum remains relatively stable despite deficiencies or excess. Calcium is necessary for the firing of nerves, amongst many other things. So we have a certain concentration in the serum at all times. And if we're lacking it from our diet, so for example, someone goes dairy-free and they're not eating other sources of it, our bones will start to break down and release calcium so that we can maintain those concentrations in the blood. Chronically elevated cortisol inhibits calcium from being absorbed into bone, but not being released from bone. This means that what you're eating isn't actually getting into bone, but it's being excreted. And so if you're subpar in terms of your dietary calcium intake, significantly more is being let out into the bloodstream and subsequently excreted in the urine as well. So high levels of stress have been implicated in osteoporosis for a very long time because of this effect on calcium. Next, let's dive into some other ways that we see stress depleting micronutrients. So the first here is going to be gut issues. Chronic stress for many people inhibits the creation of stomach acid and the maintenance of healthy stomach acid levels. Stomach acid is directly necessary for the absorption of B12 and another key micronutrient, iron. So we can have further depletion if we're experiencing this already. Probably the most direct and common symptom of low stomach acid is just feeling like food is sitting very heavy in your stomach after you eat it, with a bit of distension and also feeling significantly full, even on smaller quantities of food. And then you do also have downstream potential for lots of gas, potential constipation, and even loose stools in some cases. If the low stomach acid persists, however, we increase the risk of developing small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, significantly increased intestinal permeability, and other gut pathologies, which can affect the absorption of many different micronutrients, not limited to the ones we've discussed in this episode. In addition to that, if we're in that state for a prolonged period of time, we're going to have more inflammation. And that inflammation also depletes a set of micronutrients, including vitamin A, vitamin D, C, E, B6, B12, folate, zinc, iron, copper, magnesium, and selenium. So an even longer list than what we were talking about earlier in today's episode. So you can have a lot of potential downstream consequences because of this. Finally, when most people are stressed and they aren't controlling their intake, they tend to gravitate towards slightly less micronutrient dense choices. And really, a lot of folks go for those hyperpalatable processed food choices, especially when stressed or anxious. And assuming, that they are still eating regularly, we have a potential for decreased consumption of all of our potential micronutrients if people aren't making deliberate choices for nutrient dense sources. When most people are stressed and aren't really focused on healthy food choices or their nutritional intake, they may gravitate towards hyperpalatable processed foods. So then we see a potential for decreased consumption of all micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals, but also gut issues can be exacerbated from those poor food choices as well, especially if it's hyperpalatable processed foods. While I always advocate getting micronutrients through food first, a very highly stressed individual should probably be supplementing with at least a few of these nutrients that we've talked about inside today's show. Magnesium and a B complex, for example, even if your diet is on point, can be a great starting point. Many individuals are deficient in magnesium, even if they're eating a healthy diet. Now, if you're in a calorie deficit and stress is higher, micronutrient intake is automatically going to be on the lower side of the spectrum, and just your overall absorption and maintenance of those nutrients. Multivitamins can help in situations like this, but many of them are not going to have enough in terms of milligrams of magnesium, or you may need some supplemental vitamin C, vitamin E, B vitamins, vitamin D, things that we've talked about through today's show. If gut issues are already present, you are going to have absorption issues that could be going on. So you need to make sure you're addressing gut health as well, not just only supplementing with these micronutrients. Using a tool like Chronometer and even pushing small changes in food choices to make up the difference in any nutritional gaps can be a game changer as well. So many people are only tracking macros and calories, and they're not really managing that micronutrient part of the conversation. Managing stress is also going to be paramount. I have a whole podcast on the principles of stress management. You can go way back in the audio feed to find that one if you want. Look under stress management, or on Spotify, you can use that search bar if you'd like. Now, chronic stress directly depletes magnesium, B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin E, D, zinc, and calcium, but it can deplete a host of other micronutrients indirectly through the gut issues that it creates and even some of the downstream physiological consequences that we talked about in today's episode. Supplements can be a good idea during highly stressful times, whether that's psychological stress, a diet phase, intense training, preparing for a competition, and others. But you still need to make sure that stress management is a key part of your routine so that cortisol isn't running rampant and having effects not only on your diurnal rhythm, your quality of sleep, quality of life, and ability to make good choices related to your training and nutrition and more. This episode is a prime example of how nutritional status is impacted not only by nutrition, but also lifestyle factors. Chronic stress can wreak havoc on gut health, hormonal dysfunction, impact our circadian and diurnal rhythm, sleep quality, and so much more. So yes, we do need to prioritize stress management, but understand that we're not expecting a stress-free life, but we may need to bolster our ability to cope with it and manage it. And sometimes that may require dietary changes and nutritional supplementation to backfill any gaps or deficiencies that we have, on top of the lifestyle practices that I frequently talk about in stress management episodes, whether that's music, nature, time outside, animals, journaling, loved ones, relationships, counseling, whatever you choose to manage your stress. Realize that it has far-reaching effects beyond just whether or not you feel that fight or flight response, but also micronutrient status, micronutrient absorption, and so much more. If you found value in today's episode or learned something new or change your perspective, or you plan to even use some of the teaching points to share either with your clients or in content of your own, please share the show and drop a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen. Those ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify go a long way in helping other like-minded people find the content that they're looking for to optimize their health or help the people around them. Chances are you found the show because someone shared it with you, or through their ratings and reviews, it helped to trigger the algorithm to allow this content to appear in their feed. You can always give a shout out to the show and share it by tagging me on social media. I'm at Sam Miller Science. We try to minimize the amount of advertisements, distractions, and paid influence on this show so you guys can get the education and information that you need without being interrupted constantly throughout the entire podcast. I like to keep it informative, effective, and entertaining so you guys are getting the best possible information, but not turning it into, a 3 or 4 hour production with enough commercials to fill a TV sitcom. So if you appreciate and enjoy the show, please share it. Those rating and reviews go a really long way. If you're watching on video, give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. I appreciate you guys tuning into today's show, and I will talk to you in the next one.